right, welcome back. So now with lesson 1 of IS-700B, an introduction to the National Incident Management System. In this first lesson, we'll explore the fundamentals, what NIMS is, who it applies to, and how it connects to all responders, organizations, and communities during an emergency. So let's get into it. By the end of this lesson, ideally you'll be able to describe the applicability and scope of NIMS and understand its key concepts and guiding principles: flexibility, standardization, and unity of effort. If that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you now, that's fine. We'll build on that. Because for EMS and healthcare professionals, this knowledge is really critical. So you'll learn it. You'll see how your hospital, ambulance service, or medical team fits into the larger national framework that ensures coordination and consistency throughout the process, whether you're treating one critical patient or hundreds after a disaster. So let's start with the basics. What is NIMS? The National Incident Management System defines a comprehensive approach to incident management. You may have taken the ICS 100 and 200 classes and got a little bit of this, and so we're building. So, NIMS. What? NIMS provides a structure and processes that allow agencies to work together efficiently during emergencies. Who? It involves the whole community. That means local, state, tribal, federal governments, private businesses, nonprofits, everyday citizens, everybody. Why? So that we can prevent, protect against, mitigate, respond to, and recover from incidents of all types. And when? NIMS applies to every incident, large and small, natural or human cause, from local traffic collision to a major multi-state disaster. We have this standardized way of doing things that really helps us build, focus, but keep a standard that allows us to integrate with everybody else. For healthcare workers, this means when your hospital activates its emergency plan or EMS units coordinate with fire and law enforcement, everybody operates under the same playbook, and that's why it's so important. It ensures consistency, safety, and speed because we're more efficient. NIMS is not just for first responders, it's for any organization that plays a role in emergency management or public safety. You will meet a lot of people, emergency coordinators, etc., that don't have the background that you have, are not in the field like EMTs or law enforcement regularly. That's what their specialty is. They fit into this puzzle. And so that includes emergency services and medical providers, like you likely will be, but it includes non-governmental organizations like the Red Cross or local volunteer groups, or private sector partners such as utility companies and hospitals. It may include elected officials and policymakers and individuals of all types, individuals with disabilities or access and functional needs. Everybody plays a part in this preparedness picture. The scope of NIMS covers all incidents, regardless of size or complexity. We've said that before. And even planned events like parades, marathons, concerts. We build this foundation so that if something were to happen in a high-risk environment, like an area where we have 100,000 people all together, that's on national TV, we have that framework ready to go, built, organized, so that we don't have to scramble and make decisions as things are happening. We can make a lot of these decisions in the planning phase and be set up for success, God forbid something happens. For those of us in healthcare at EMS, this means the principles apply whether we're planning mass public health clinic, or responding to a mass casualty incident, or preparing for hospital surge, or responding to flood. These are the types of times we would likely encounter this sort of framework. So NIMS provides a national framework for how the whole community works together. Can't say that enough. It brings together all levels of government, NGOs, private sector under a single system that promotes coordination, resource sharing, and effective communication. Also, can't say that enough. In other words, NIMS is our blueprint for how your local ambulance, hospital, public health department, local emergency management office work in sync during an emergency. Without NIMS, communication breaks down, resources overlap or get missed, and response times increase. With NIMS, we operate like one team with one mission, saving lives and restoring normal operations as quickly as possible. And to give you a good example of this, if you've listened to any sort of radio traffic for a law enforcement or fire department, you'll see that radio etiquette is very well organized because we're trained on this sort of language and etiquette to call and ask for resources and respond in a way that's very uniform, concise, and clean and efficient. And if you've been anywhere else where people are using walkie-talkies, it's not the radios or walkie-talkies that are the problem. It's really just everybody on the system being on the same page. And so if you're at a campsite or a soccer game or whatever, and you and your friends have walkie-talkies, you can see how that communication is a lot looser, a lot less concise. And, while that would probably serve you and your friends, who all of 5 people are sharing this one channel, it may not work very well if you've got hundreds or thousands of people on this radio system, all asking for resources, working very hard, updating supervisors and incident commanders. We need to have this framework. We need to take it seriously and understand it so that it's ready to go when we need it. And so I created this little diagram here that gives you an idea of what NIMS is and what NIMS is not. Hopefully this is helpful. If not, we'll continue. So let's pause for reflection for a second. What are some common features of NIMS that you've already seen in action? Maybe your agency uses common radio terminology, or your hospital participates in multi-agency drills with law enforcement and fire. These are all NIMS principles at work, even if you didn't realize it at the time. That's why we practice these things together with agencies and community members that we don't interact with on every single usual call, so that we can have this practice. So if you have any creative ideas to share of areas where you might have seen NIMS being incorporated, feel free to drop those in a comment, and let's see what your takeaways are. Did you learn anything? Was it helpful? Was it well done? NIMS operates on 3 guiding principles that keep it adaptable and effective across all types of incidents. 1, flexibility. 2, standardization. And 3, unity of effort. Every decision in emergency management ties back to these 3 concepts. They allow us to scale a response appropriately, communicate clearly, coordinate across disciplines. That's why it's so important. For healthcare providers, these principles mean that a hospital's emergency plan can integrate seamlessly with county EMS and public health, ensuring unified operations from the street to the surgical suite. See what I did there? Through and through. So let's start our first guiding principle, flexibility. Flexibility means NIMS can scale up or scale down depending on the incident. A small local event might only involve a single EMS unit and police officer, while a large scale disaster could involve multiple states, federal agencies, national medical teams, thousands of volunteers, and the like. NIMS is adaptable to any type of hazard, natural disasters, infectious disease outbreaks, hazardous material spills, or even large planned public gatherings like filling a stadium with 100,000 people for a sporting event or a concert. For example, a hospital can apply the same NIMS framework whether it's managing a surge of flu patients or responding to a regional disaster like a flood or something. Flexibility ensures we can adjust quickly without losing structure or control. The second guiding principle is standardization, the secret to interoperability. Standardization means that everyone uses the same basic structures, processes, and terminology. NIMS defines standard organizational roles like incident commander and operations section chief. It defines standard practices such as resource typing and mutual aid, and it promotes common terminology so that communication remains clear under stress. You might remember things like not using 10 codes and other sorts of shortcuts that might be unique to your organization only. All of this helps standardization. For healthcare responders, that means you're working with anyone from regional strike team to deploying to another jurisdiction entirely that you might not be super familiar with. You'll recognize the same command structure and vocabulary, and that's what we're trying to preserve and maintain. When everyone speaks the same operational language, coordination becomes seamless, and that directly impacts patient outcomes. I promise. So now on to the third principle, unity of effort, which means we're coordinating across different organizations to achieve shared goals. Each agency maintains its own authority, but all work towards the same objectives. Unity of effort allows a hospital to coordinate with EMS, fire, law enforcement, and emergency management while still following its own internal policies. During a large-scale incident, you might have dozens of agencies involved, but through NIMS, they're united under common objectives like saving lives, stabilizing the situation, protecting property and the environment. It's like a symphony. Every musician plays a different instrument, but they all follow the same sheet music and they're all at the same place on that piece of music so that we're all playing together. It might seem like something from the outside that, is a no-brainer that should automatically happen. But as you spend some time in EMS, you will realize that even cities that constantly respond in each other's areas for, mutual aid and just low, resource levels daily, maybe. Those two agencies have a tendency to do things very different. Every department, every agency has their flavor, their way. And I understand, that's part of the buy-in that, they like for uniformity and standardization within that agency or that department. But we need to take a step back and realize and think about what we're doing when we're operating with other people, other agencies on a large scale. So now let's look at the major components of NIMS. Every successful response relies on 3 pillars. Resource management, which is how we identify, order, track personnel and equipment, Command and coordination, how leadership structures like ICS and the EOCs and multi-agency coordination groups work together. And 3, communications and information management, how responders share information quickly and accurately to maintain a common operating picture. Hopefully this is starting to make sense. For EMS and healthcare providers, this framework ensures that medical supplies, personnel, information all flow efficiently during crises. If one of these components fails, for example, communication breaks down, the entire response can be compromised and, well, that's not helpful. So, let's get into our next discussion question. Let's take a moment to think about your organization or whatever exposure you've had to a fire department or ambulance company up until this point. What actions or practices demonstrate NIMS best practices where you work? Maybe it's your EMS agency participating in regional disaster drills. Maybe it's your hospital maintaining a resource inventory or operating under a hospital incident command system, HICS, which exists. All of these are examples of NIMS in action. So if you have any interesting experiences to add, again, I urge you to throw those in the comments and share some knowledge with others. So let's wrap up lesson 1. We've covered the purpose and background of NIMS, its scope and who it applies to, the guiding principles, flexibility, standardization, unity of effort, all good stuff. And 3 major framework components: resource management, command, coordination, communication, and information management. A lot of big words, a lot of things that kind of go hand in hand. Hopefully it's starting to make sense. For EMS and healthcare professionals, NIMS isn't abstract policy. It's not just an idea. It really is a practical system. And we'll get into, the more tangible components of that system that, are real resources that make sense to people like us who are in the field in the next, couple lectures. But trust me now, it's a practical system that connects your local response to the national network. So great work finishing lesson 1, fundamentals and concepts of NIMS. You've just learned how flexibility, standardization, and unity of effort keep response or operations organized. Great. So whether you're a single patient, EMS call, or you're part of a large hospital surge plan, hopefully these things start to make sense. Next up is lesson 2, NIMS resource management, where we'll break down how agencies identify and type their resources and track their resources so everything from personnel to medical supplies gets where it's needed, fast, without delay. And that stuff, super important to us in the field. Before you go, here's a quick discussion question for the comments. Have you ever been part of a situation where resources or personnel were stretched thin during emergency? Maybe a situation where there was common knowledge of where the resources were. They were available in some capacity, but just not where they needed to be, and so therefore not helpful or not available. How did your team adapt, and what lessons did you take away from it? It doesn't have to be medically related or emergency related. If you have anything that comes to mind, share it in the comments. And as always, do not forget to like this video if it helped you connect the dots. Subscribe to the channel if you are taking any of these courses through and through, especially so that you can get updated with content as we upload it. Comment below to share any of the experiences that we've prompted, or if you have any questions, your story could help someone else learn. So see you in lesson 2, where we'll explore how resource management keeps every response strong and coordinated.